World building. So it's been a few years since I last tackled this subject, and it has been one of the most popular videos on my channel, so I thought I would revisit it and refresh the content on it and add a few more bits and pieces to hopefully help you guys out. So world building doesn't really work for the present day in Earth and or past history of Earth, because obviously, you know, things have a name, so you can't really reapply or change history. Or can you? I guess you can change history if you become like a tyrannical ruler and, you know, literally change history in the books. But, you know, that's a little step too far and not really the direction we're going in today. But of course, it does work for post-apocalyptics where, you know, societal collapse brings with it lots of creativity and fun, in the writing sense at least. And of course, it works for fantasy and sci-fi worlds as well. So if we focus on towns and cities first, I think just like normal settlements, nothing too regional or anything like that. Mainly post-apocalyptic, but this can really apply to anything. The first things I would do is make a list. So write down the geographical location of the place, write down the attitude of the people living there, write down what the town is striving to achieve. You know, is it a trade port? Is it a military base? Are they self-sufficient people? Are they friendly? Are they hostile? What do they do? Are they skilled, unskilled? Essentially, flesh these locations out, and then you will have a very clear image of what the place is like, and that will help direct you in finding the perfect name for it. So I have a place called Carbon City. It sounds kind of like a formal name, like it's kind of a bit boring, a bit bland, but that reflects the attitude of the city to a point. It's one of the largest places. They've called themselves a city, which is, you know, it's pretty ballsy of them to go and call themselves a city. They have mines, which is where I derived the word carbon from. So Carbon City, it's a pretty like smoggy sort of place. It's quite grey. People have like normal jobs. It's kind of like how society used to be. Like there's a kind of a structure and a hierarchy of people there. And of course with city tacked on the end, not only does it sound big, but maybe it's a little bit prestigious. You know, it's a Carbon City, you know. Oh look, it's a city out in like the post-apocalyptic wasteland. Like, ooh, you know, they must have some things going on. So that helped to establish its size. It helped to establish the attitude of, you know, sort of professional in the sense that they've got mines up and running. They can supply people with jobs. And it was better than a name which I could have based near the mountain where the mines are in. Because if I called it like Ridge City, that kind of sounds a bit too fun and sharp. Like, Carbon City isn't fun and sharp. It's pretty boring. So that fitted perfectly. Now, another place that I have made is Trickle. Now, you can pause it here and guess why I've called it Trickle before I actually get to it. But here we go. Essentially, it is the base of the Eastern Legion, a militaristic group that, you know, they're pretty stern, they're pretty stubborn, they do what they want. And generally people don't really mess with them because they've got some more advanced tech that they don't really share with anyone. And how I came up with the word Trickle, it was just based on the personality of the military group there. Now, when I thought of their group, you know, I started off with like stern and then went on to like thesaurus.com and was looking at related words to, you know, stern. And I eventually come across one called brittle, which, you know, brittle things, you know, tend to snap and break. They're not flexible, which I thought was nice. But calling a place brittle was kind of too on the nose. So all I done was just start swapping out the first letter. Like that's until it sounded right. Trickle. That sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I'll go for Trickle. Like, there wasn't really much thought after that, so I found a word that I liked that reflected the people that lived there, but then I didn't want it so on the nose, so I swapped out the first letter. Another example is Rosette, which I spoke about in my previous world building video, which is a trading town on the coast. It's quite poor. The image I had for it was, you know, people getting scrap metal being washed up and they're using that as their building materials, and the metal being by the coast is rusting, so the town is kind of a bit like reddy orangey, like it doesn't look the greatest. And from that image and idea of color of the place, of it being red, I then went on to thesaurus and found some synonyms of red, and eventually it led me to like chestnut and an auburn and then russet, because apparently russet just means red. But it's a fancier way of saying it apparently, so I stuck with russet because it kind of fitted in with Trickle and Carbon City. They were all different from each other, which also brings me on to the next point, that because they're different to each other, it signals to the reader that they don't have any like direct relations to each other, these towns and villages and cities. Like, they're their own settlements. Now, this was pointed out to me by Remodactyl, someone who commented on my previous video, so thank you for this. But yes, because they're all different and they don't share anything, you think that they're separate. Whereas if they were to share the same sort of syllables and same endings between each other, it would bring into your mind that they might be closely linked. So if I had russet and then I had musket for Trittle instead, and then perhaps I had another village called Russ, having Russ, Russet and Musket, like they're kind of the same. They're not the same, but they kind of are the same. So you would kind of feel like the people that are between them are all very similar. Perhaps they all do roughly the same sort of things. And that's not what I wanted to achieve in my book. I wanted a sense of individuality between the settlements to help create tension and maybe conflict, which there is between them. So I think Remedactyl was mainly focusing on the fantasy, and essentially he said like if you had the word hill and the word hill was like implemented into like a majority of settlements, they would have a shared similarity. So if we change that to, I don't know, instead of calling it hill, I'll call it keel. And then I had a place called Russet Keel, Trittle Keel, and Carbon Keel. Having that on the map would help to identify either certain landmarks that each location had. They're aware that there might be something in common, not directly, but perhaps whether it's a landmark or similar land structure. Now for regions, which was mentioned by Dutch Vanderlyn, I don't know why he would want to have a name for a region when he could just go to Tahiti, but you've just got to think wider for regions. So I think Europe is either from Mesopotamia or Greece, and it's either to do with the word sunset or from the deity goddess Europa, which is to do with Earth. So both things is either it's called, like Europe is called Earth, essentially in like an older language, or it's to do with the direction of the sun setting or rising. And the same goes for Asia. Asia is either based on like the first settlement that the Greeks encountered with the Persian Empire, or again, it was to do with the direction of the sun. So if you're thinking of regions, I mean, really, I think just geography plays a role in it. So if you look at like Game of Thrones and Westeros, it literally has the word West in it. So maybe just go along those simple lines. In my book, I've got a region called the Eastern Belt. Now, it's not a very big region, but it's basically a strip of land where I think it's only Russet and Trittle are based on, with maybe a few tiny settlements in between, that runs along a ridge line. And I've called it the Eastern Belt because there's a ravine that runs through it, a fault line. That's the belt, and it's to the east, so Eastern Belt. If you have a particularly mountainous region or map that your world's based in, just maybe type in north, cut it to Spanish, so it's norte, and then slice up the words and add peak for mountain. So you could have Tay Peak, and you've taken that from norte, the Spanish for north, and put it with mountain. That sounds pretty good. I might use that myself. So with regions, I think really you just want to base it on the resources that are there and the geographical location, whether it's north, south, east or west, along with like the features. So is there any significant like landmarks, like a huge ravine or a pit, or has an explosion gone off there, or is it full of gold and riches and dungeons and stuff like that? Pick out some defining features and try to base it on that. Now, if you do want me to go wider with like plants and stuff, I can do. You just write in the comments below, or if you'd like me to make names for your stuff, I can perhaps just go through a bunch of images from Google and just flick through and make some fictional names up for you guys to use if you're watching, if that's something that you'd be interested in. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video.